Hey guys, this is Gizmo, and today I'd like to go over a few things about the new Ford Model A, the Model Ace mod that I've just done. So you see here there's the short wheelbase and long wheelbase version. For the purpose of the video, I'm going to pick the long wheelbase. Now this car might take a bit of time to load in because it's a bit on the heavy side, but don't worry about that. It shouldn't be a problem. For this video I'm going to go for 2 double wishbone. That will come in handy for explaining something later on about the long wheelbase car not being able to deal with double wishbone. I'm just going to pick an engine. Got the Ace Spade, I think, yes, okay. So for this video I'm going to go and pick the Roadster. Give it a second to load in. There you go. Okay, so first things you might see is that there is actually no panel gap for a trunk. That's because when I made my pre-war fixture pack, I did, let me find it here, I did a fixture for a rumble seat, which I then immediately realized didn't really work well because it didn't line up with the panel gap of the trunk on some cars. But by making this car have no trunk, since it's the car that will most likely use rumble seat the most out of any car, it's pretty much the only one where it really makes sense. Now I can do this and the panel seam of the trunk does not interfere with this. And if you want another trunk, you can always pick it closed. One thing that I might do in the future, probably soon, will be to make a variant of this rumble seat with no handle, so you can pick whatever handle you actually want instead of having the one that comes with it. That's a thing that I have thought of for the future, so I'm just going to cross out rumble seat from my list. That's the thing that I've done. I'm going to go back into the morphs here and look over a few things. First off, many of the cars that I've made have these seats which are separated here in the interior. You can morph them together in order to make benches. That's in case you didn't know. I did that in the past with other cars. I just wanted to go over this now too. Also, one thing that I like to mention is that there is a morph somewhere around here that selects the old roof and flip it into an open roof. So that's a thing that you can look forward to. I've seen a lot of cars using the old Bracera Phaeton car that doesn't have a roof at all, but I don't think I've seen much or any cars that were roadsters with the roof down. So I just wanted to point this out. One thing that I've noticed with this car is that when you're using this morph, you might get some problem with your grille. I cannot fix those, I don't know how, so I'll go over that with you just right now. The idea being that since this can make hot rods, you can actually remove those panels like this by hiding them under the car. Oh, I just dropped it. Oh, actually that's a good idea. What happened here is that I cannot select this morph anymore because it is underneath the invisible surface which lets you put fixtures around the actual engine. So if you want to select it again, you have to clip yourself inside and you'll be able to grab it from the inside of the engine bay. So from here you get the open engine bay and you can see that there's actually a modeled surface on the inside here of the grille, and I think that's the cause of my problem with the grills, and I'm going to show this real quick. It doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does, and I'd like to explain it so people know why it does that. I'm just going to position it something like this, and I'm going to try to replicate the bug. Hopefully it works. Doesn't seem to do it right now. It works, but sometimes when this pointy edge in the grill is pulled forward, the inside of the grill will become some kind of black hole that shoots through all the way to the firewall, and I don't know why. So usually if you play around with the grill or you reduce this crease, it eventually goes away. Or another thing that you can do is not that, but rather one thing that does work is to make two grills separately like this. When it doesn't clip in the middle, of course. This doesn't seem to make any bugs, but obviously there is a lot of times where you're going to want it to be like this, and yeah, you might end up with a problem where the grill is poking inside. Let's see if I can find another fixture that actually does that. This one maybe? Just try real quick to recreate this one more time. Well, it doesn't fit and doesn't do it. Yeah, of course, when you try to show something, it doesn't do it. Well, anyway, so there's a possible problem with the grill. You are warned about it. You can actually try to avoid it by playing around with your grills. So that's the grill bug crossed out. Engine bay morph. So the invisible surface that goes around the engine can actually... Wait, where's my engine? Oh yeah, you have to skip ahead into drivetrain and choose something to make the engine spawn in, which I suggest doing if you're making a hot rod, because then you can go back into fixtures and line up stuff around the engine. That's small for this car, but who cares? That's just an example. When I'm talking about lining up stuff, I'm talking about, for example, my new hot rod exhaust mod. I'm going to pick something like this, and I'm going to line it up with the engine like so. You can scale it up and down to match different engines, and of course move it back and forth if the engine's not in the right spot. You might not be able to mirror them correctly, because as you can see, automation engines appear to have the cylinder a bit offset. That's probably true for all engine if that's like this here. It's just not something that I took into account because I'm an artist and not a mechanical engineer. As you can see, this can cause other problems like this here, where the mount for the exhaust is where the exhaust is attached to the car rather than behind the exhaust. It's not supposed to be like that. There's locators in Unreal that are supposed to bring this here, but the way I found to avoid having this exhaust poke through the body in this ugly manner is to go and find, I don't know if it's a mod or if it's vanilla. Oh, it's vanilla, cool. So there's no tip here. You can go like this and mirror that. Okay, and that way the engine, the exhaust will be right here, right behind these, so the smoke should come out roughly where the actual exhaust are, but it's actually hidden underneath the body, so you don't have to worry about it. That's great. And I didn't have to make it because it already existed. When it comes to other fixtures that need to be placed on the body, there is the new expanded version of Hard Rooster's blower mod, which I've worked a lot on, which should be out by the time I'm releasing this. Might take this as an opportunity to show how to use it. First off, you have to pick a base for your blower. I'm going to pick this one. I'm going to try to put it onto the engine here. Now that one is not the right one. You see there is a cutout, and I don't need a cutout because I've removed the engine base. So I'm going to go and look for Giant 4-carb V8, no cutout. That's the one I want. There's no cutout on this one, but obviously it's way too high. Of course, if you make another hot rod, I'll show you that you can chop and channel this car with morph targets with modifiers in this section of the body. But if you don't shrink the entire car down like this, another way that you can bring this to be exactly on the engine is to morph the inside of the engine bay, which is invisible. There is supposed to be more fendels around here or on the windshield of most of the cars for this purpose. Unfortunately, they can be very hard to grab, so I usually use them as a guide. I don't even see them in this one because red on red, jeez. But you can grab in the invisible area and pull down, and the fixtures are going to go red, indicating that the surface on which they are attached is moving. And this will let you lower it until you think that it's at the right height. Then you can go back to fixture and bring it to whatever size you want, adjust the position. As you can see, the pulleys are going into the engine block, which is great because that's how it should be. And then when you've done positioning your new blower, you can go and look for a type of scoop. Now I don't have all of the scoop yet, and some of them don't have their custom thumbnails here, basically because this is a work in progress from Hard Rooster. It wasn't done at the time of making this video, but I'm going to pick, say, this one here, and now there's multiple position that you can choose. If I go back to here, you see that this one in the thumbnail says position TO for tower, because this is basically the same height as the double supercharger. So we're looking at a position TO scoop. So if I go to this, there's this one which is directly on the hood, with cutout, no cutout. This one is for position S for a single supercharger, T for tower, T for T mount. This is TO for tower and TT for T tower, because there's, or twin tower rather, because that's two double superchargers side by side, and the Y one is because it's Y shaped. So I'm going to go and pick the one I need, which is TO. This one is sized appropriately for this. Of course, I've sized the blower up, so right now it doesn't fit, but I can bring it here. Now it's selected the blower, so you have to be careful about that. Just make sure you reselect this, and now you can scale it up. And because it's floating at the same height as a intake should be over this type of blower, you can go like this and it will be lined up. So that's how you use the new blower mod. Now, that being said, the other thing that I need to speak about, so I talked about what? Talked about blowers, the seat, the rumble seat, the bug with the grill. Next thing I'm going to talk about is lamps. Yes, okay, so there's a bunch of fixture which was recently added to the pre-war mega pack, and there's a bunch of change that happens too. So I'm going to start with the this family here. You can see that there are a bunch of spare wheels in this family. I've taken the spare wheels that didn't have a trunk on it and made them into a separate family and made a bunch of new variants of that. So now there's a version that you can attach on the side of the car, which pokes in like this. There's also variants which end up, I'm going to make it like this, like a pill shape like this, which for other types of cars will be great, because that way you can, if it goes a bit above the trunk line, for example, this will help make it look like it's a part of the body and it's not just poking through like this. That doesn't work. So there's a bunch of new fixtures like this, and these which already existed are now separate. Another thing that I did was in the headlight mod. Headlight, please. Okay. This family here, actually all of the family for this, as this thing here. I know the thumbnail is a bit intrusive, but I made it this way so that people would know what it is and what it's used for. Basically, this is a fixture that's temporary, and you use it like this. You're going to go and try and use the fact that it's touching the surface, so it's easier to grab and move, unlike many of my floating lamps, which usually teleport around when you grab them a second time. And then you can grab it and bring it really close to this edge here very easily, and when you're done positioning it, as it's still selected, you can swap it for any other fixture that you want, which is very useful when you're trying to get one of the elevated lamps to work, like this one here. And now I can scale it up a bit so it doesn't interfere with the fender. And as you can see, it's not only floating correctly, but it's also very much offset to the center. The green thing, the fixture placement helper, is around this edge, but the light is not centered on that. It's offset because I've offsetted all of the floating ones so that they could be installed in a position that looks a lot better for this kind of classic cars. And if you don't like that because it's too far, you can always bring them closer in. Like if I flip them horizontally, you can see how far they move from side to side. They're not at all centered under attach point. So that's cool. Is there anything more about fixture? I've talked about the lamp, talked about these things. I think I've went and gone through all of the things I had to talk about with the fixtures. I've talked about the engine bay morph too. So now it's time to make the car low. So I'm going to go and run through all of those choices without caring at all with what I'm doing. This is all pointless and not needed for this test. Here the ride height is set at the minimum, but problem with this car is that the long wheelbase, well, I've had an example of that, a car that really didn't work with the double wishbone in the front. I tried to fix it by editing the J-beam, but it was getting very complicated, and it didn't work. I'm going to put a video at the end of a test I did after editing J-beam. It's quite funny, but yeah, if there's a way to edit the J-beam files of a car of the long wheelbase family with double wishbone suspension in the front, I didn't find it, and it would be too hard to explain in the workshop page or in a video for noobs like myself. So I'm going to go and use another workaround, which I've just found out and I hope won't be updated anytime soon. And that is that when you've done your entire car and it is complete and done, what you can do is go back right at the beginning, go into the chassis option, and you can change one suspension option without it updating the ride height right away. So I'm going to pick the front one, which is the one that breaks. I'm going to go and put leaf, and then when we go back, we can see that in the suspension the ride height is still at the same height, but we have leaf spring now. We have leaf springs, but the ride height didn't change. Of course, if you touch this or anything, it might update and then it's going to ruin the style of the car, but as long as you don't touch it, you can then go at the back here and export it as is with the ride height as you want it. And it's going to be much easier to fix the steering problem, as in much easier as in possible, while you edit the J-beam, because if you make a car like this with leaf spring in the front, you're going to get probably a steering value of something like 1.8 minus 1.8, which we can reduce to something like 0.8 and minus 0.8 using the tutorial on the other video, and this will just work. But if you use the double wishbone suspension, the steering factor in J-beam would be something like 17 and minus 17, which is enormous, and it looks like the minimum working value is above the maximum. So if it's above the minimum, it's above the maximum too. It's overlapped in a way that there is no value that could possibly work. And this is why you need to swap the suspension like this and hope that the game does not update the ride height. But it does work. So I think I've gone and looked through all of the things that needed to be said. Quick note that I forgot is that aside from the ride height, which has now updated and broken, there is another trick that lets you make this car looks lower, and that's a very hidden morph right here at the bottom of the side skirt where you can pull down. This brings the floor of the car lower to the ground, and in addition to the suspension, which I'm going to put back to double wishbone just so I can show you. So as you can see, with this morph right here, you can get the car to look even closer to the ground. And that's the thing that needs to be said. And like I'm going to talk to you in a second in a separate clip, you can remove the entire fenders to make an open wheel hot rod, which can be hard to completely remove. But you can make this kind of open wheel hot rod like this, and when you do that, you're going to encounter problems with the chassis being visible, which you can tick off if you're making a picture in automation with just this easy button. But in BeamNG, you'll need to follow the steps that I'm going to show you in a moment. It's a bit similar to what you have to do to fix the steering, as shown in the other video that I've made on my channel. But I'm going to show it to you anyway. So right here you've got the mod, which you would have taken out of your mod folder of BeamNG after exporting the car. You unzip it into a folder like this, then you go and you copy the name of the zip file, and when you open this window you create a new empty zip file and you give it the same name in order to recreate the zip file later on. Then you go inside of the car, and when you fix the suspension or the steering problem, you usually go inside of the suspension front folder like this. You go all the way at the bottom in the hydros paragraph and you look for the steering factor here, which I've already fixed for this car. This car has already been fixed. Factor being, it was 1.8 and minus 1.8. I made it 0.8 and minus 0.8, and you can flip the minus from side to side if the steering is inverted. This is how you fix the steering wheel problem. Now if you want to make a hot rod with no fenders and the chassis is invisible, then you have to go inside of this and go and look for the JBeam file that has the same name as the car. Then you're going to open this in Notepad++, which again is a free program you can easily get online, and you're going to look for a paragraph which is called Flex Body. I mix it, yeah, there, Flex Body. In one of the first line, I think it's always the third, but I'm not sure, you'll see a line that starts with open bracket, chassis 1, etc., etc. Just add two dashes in front of it, like this, and click Save. And this makes the chassis invisible in Beam. It still exists, but it's invisible. After you've done that, just like with fixing the steering wheel problem, you go back to here, you select Heart and Vehicle, drag that inside of this to recreate a complete mod, and you copy this inside of the folder of BeamNG, and your car should be fixed with an invisible automation chassis underneath. So I hope that you're going to enjoy it. And now I'm going to let you with a video of my steering experiment that didn't work in the past in BeamNG. Right, so steering test in BeamNG. I'm going to start with some small inputs. Yeah, that doesn't move at all. Let's try to see how long it takes to reach full steering lock according to this indicator. Oh, the car is already trying to brake and the steering isn't moving that much. Oh, and we've made a black hole. We're still steering. We're still steering. The car is eating itself. We're still steering. We're still steering. Now the car's fallen over. We've just steered. Now we've just reached steering lock. Let's see how long it takes to go back to normal. And we're steering back. Steering back. Still steering back. Good God. And we're normal. Yeah, that doesn't work.